Hi, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to our Tallahassee Leads Here event. My name is Lex Phillips. I am a Board of Governors member and also the membership chair this year, so I'm really excited about that. I'm going to give you some information about Leadership Tallahassee. We're pleased to continue our Tallahassee Leads Here monthly program. This series was designed to offer our membership and community a way to access leadership development and information in an engaging and interactive way. If you have attended a Tallahassee Leads Here, you know this goes beyond the typical webinar experience. With that in mind, please refer to the chat box, which Rebecca just posted something in there. If you have any questions or guidelines to help maximize your training for you and other attendees. Although we never imagined the scenario that was the catalyst to implement the series, a global pandemic, the current Leadership Tallahassee strategic plan outlines explore digital ways to connect and engage as a strategy for increasing engagement of LT participants. We are proud to offer this series. Thank you to CarePoint Health and Wellness for being a sponsor of this Tallahassee Leads Here program. Here's a quick message from them.
When it comes to your health, you and your family deserve safe, quality care you can feel good about. Right here in Tallahassee, you can visit your primary care doctor, get lab work and x-rays done, visit the dentist, and pick up your prescriptions all in one convenient location. CarePoint accepts most insurance and Medicare plans. CarePoint Health and Wellness Center, the region's only comprehensive healthcare facility. Contact us today to schedule your new patient appointment. When it comes to your health,
Okay, thank you, Amanda, and thank you to our sponsor. With that, I would like to introduce our speaker for today's training. Erin Collins is the Executive Director of the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. The Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking is a nonprofit organization created by the Florida legislature to provide funding, support, and assistance to the statewide effort to end human trafficking. Prior to this role, Erin served as the External Affairs Manager for the Agency of State Technology, overseeing all legislative affairs and communication efforts. She has also previously worked as a consultant with National Strategies and worked in many positions with the Florida Tax Watch. Erin is involved in various community organizations and clubs, including the Junior League of Tallahassee, Florida Blue Key, and the Capital Area Gator Club. Erin received her Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Bachelor of Science in Telecommunication from the University of Florida. Please join me in welcoming our presenter, Erin Collins.
Thank you, Lex, for the introduction, and good morning. Before we get started, I want to ask you a quick poll question. And the question is, how familiar are you with the topic of human trafficking? Have you heard about human trafficking and exploitation, read an article? How familiar are you with the topic? I want to thank you for taking some time out for your day today to learn more. So we've kind of got, it looks like some folks that are more on the familiar side and kind of a variety of knowledge levels. So that's great. I hope you all learned something today. So again, my name is Erin Collins. I have the privilege of serving as the Executive Director for the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. I took this role last October. This direct support organization was created by the Florida legislature to provide funding, support, and assistance to the statewide effort to end human trafficking. You're going to hear a lot of statistics, a lot of numbers from me today, but if there's only one that you remember, I hope it's this. That's 888-3737-888. That's the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Every year, millions of women, children, and men are trafficked worldwide, including right here in the United States. According to the International Labor Organization, roughly 40 million people are trafficked around the world. It can happen in any community. Victims can be any age, any race, any gender, any nationality. Human trafficking is the fastest growing and second largest criminal industry in the world. It generates 150 billion with a B dollars in illegal profits each year. Sex trafficking disproportionately affects women and children, and women and girls make up 80% of the people trafficked transnationally. So what is human trafficking? Human trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or commercial sex act. Traffickers look for people who are susceptible for a variety of different reasons. They could include psychological or emotional vulnerabilities, economic hardship, lack of a social safety net, natural disasters, political instability. And unfortunately, during this pandemic, a lot of that has been taken advantage of. Traffickers might use violence, manipulation, false promises of a well-paying job, even a romantic relationship to lure their victims into an exploitive situation. Language barriers, fear of their trafficker, fear of law enforcement often keep victims from seeking help, making human trafficking a hidden crime. The trauma caused by traffickers is so great that they might not identify themselves as a victim because trauma bonds and strong relationships have been made with their traffickers. They don't ask for help even when they're in highly public or visible situations. Social media and the internet is a huge part of the equation when it comes to trafficking. With a lot of things, misinformation, stereotypes spread very quickly, and it's often difficult to decipher what's fact versus fiction. For instance, I'm sure everyone's seen photos of individuals in chains, handcuffed, locked in a basement, kidnapping. You hear a lot of situations with kidnapping in some of this information. And those things are very rare. The majority of incidents who become victims know their trafficker. They've been groomed. They've become familiar with this individual over a period of time. It's often not a stranger. So human trafficking occurs when a perpetrator takes any one of these actions, then employs the means of force, fraud, or coercion for the purpose of compelling the victim into a trafficking and an exploitative situation. So at a minimum, one element from each of these columns must be present to establish a potential situation of human trafficking. And it's worth noting that under federal law, any minor under the age of 18 that's lured into a commercial sex is considered a victim of trafficking, regardless of the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So what are some of the indicators? Recognizing the key indicators of human trafficking is the first step in identifying victims and can potentially help save a life. So some of the indicators and questions to ask yourself is, does the person appear to be disconnected from family, from friends, from their houses of worship, from their community organizations? Has this individual stopped attending school? It's been very challenging during the pandemic and the stay-at-home as teachers, guidance counselors, school administrators aren't physically seeing these children to make sure that they're safe. Does this person appear fearful, timid? Are they submissive? Do they look like they've been left without food or water, medical care, sleep? Does this person live in an unsuitable living situation? Can they move freely about as they wish? Do they lack personal possessions? Are there unreasonable security measures? Now, not all indicators listed here are present in every human trafficking situation, and the presence or absence is not necessarily proof that human trafficking is going on. So everyone has the potential to discover a human trafficking situation. While the victims might sometimes be kept behind closed or locked doors, they're often right in front of us. That could be at hotels, at construction sites, restaurants, nail salons, agricultural fields. Traffickers' use of coercion, such as threats of deportation, harm to the victim, harm to the victim's family, it's so powerful that sometimes when people reach out, they might be too fearful to accept their help and assistance. So this slide, this information is from last year's Department of Children and Families Human Trafficking Report. And there are several factors that likely contributed to the increased numbers in these trends. So when human trafficking was added to the abuse maltreatment index at the first year on this slide, community training efforts with stakeholders, partners, staff were initiated to ensure that people could identify potential incidents of human trafficking and that they were to report it as such to the hotline. So these training initiatives were the largest contributing factor to those increased numbers in the initial first few years. Additionally, the implementation of a targeted identification and human trafficking screening tool within the Department of Juvenile Justice may have also played a role in increased identification of victims and reports to the hotline. If we break it down even further, you can see the numbers by region. And during the 18-19 year, 551 reports were made to the hotline in the Suncoast region, and that's in Southwest Florida. So I'm going to pause now and ask you, if I remember my poll question, human trafficking is less prevalent in Tallahassee in the Big Bend area. I think we're on. We've got all our results. So false, and that is accurate. So these are some headlines from the last year or so from the Tallahassee Democrat. And some of them included in these headlines are prosecuted for other crimes because it's extremely difficult to prove trafficking. Victims are often scared. They're hesitant to cooperate with law enforcement because of fear of retaliation. And again, the manipulation and the grooming that goes on with victims and their traffickers is extremely prevalent, and it's very hard to break those bonds. So how are traffickers communicating? How are they finding victims? The Sarasota County Sheriff's Office released the names of 23 men between the ages of 21 and 77 last fall, who were suspected of being child predators and traffickers on their way to meet young children. They also released this graphic here of 21 different social media tools that they use to lure children. Some of them we know, like Snapchat and TikTok. Others are less known. So Florida police conducted this sting, and they posed as children even as young as 12. And in each instance, these men went to the address provided by the undercover law enforcement officer, the child, with promises of candy, toys, other things that they had promised the kids when they met them online. And I want to highlight two of these apps. One is Best Secret Folder, and it's specifically meant to hide videos, files. It features a password protection, decoy videos, alarm settings. And the other one is Calculator and a percentage sign. It's, again, only one of several apps used to hide photos, videos, files, and browser history. And I mention those because as often as we have conversations with our children and young people who have increased screen time, over the last, several months because of the pandemic, we might see these apps and think, oh, it's, nothing out of the sort. But once you click on them, you're not making, or having this calculator app help you with your math homework. So it's so important, again, as our students and young people, even ourselves, we're on our screens more for a variety of different reasons, but especially for children, that they know the dangers, and online safety is so important during this time. And according to an MIT study from earlier this year, 1 in 5 kids online are sexually propositioned through gaming platforms and other social media. So now we think of that with regards to the pandemic and kids at home and learning virtually. So it's so important to have the proper conversations, the age-appropriate conversations, and having those security measures on your young people and young children's devices. So more about the Florida Alliance to End Human Trafficking. As I mentioned, the legislature supported the organization in its creation last year. And we support the statewide council and the Attorney General's efforts to end human trafficking in our state. One of the main components and focus of our organization is training and awareness. Training is such a huge part of prevention, and having more people learn about the signs, the indicators. So being here today is so important to stopping this horrible exploitation. I'll get into a little bit more about the training awareness in my next slide, but the other large focus of my time and our board, of which there are 13 members that are appointed by the Attorney General, the Commissioner of the Department of Law Enforcement, and the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the Florida House of Representatives. And our effort is focused on raising money. So we're a direct support organization. We do not provide any direct care to individuals. We're primarily focused on advocacy and education and awareness. And the other things that we're focused on this year, as directed by the statewide council, our board does have an independent mission outside of the directed projects by the AG and the statewide council, is to coordinate a statewide branding and awareness campaign prior to large events. As you can imagine, the state of Florida is very attractive to bring tourists to our state, to host Super Bowl events, WrestleMania, great things that we all want to attend. But unfortunately, folks see the high volume of people coming to the state and want to exploit. And there is, obviously a side for the demand as well. And that's a separate part of the conversation, which is so important in stopping that too. From some of our law enforcement officers on my board, the things that kind of shock me is the way that traffickers are going about marketing their victims to potential buyers. The latest one is folks from the realtor industry have cash buyers. We saw this in Miami, purchasing luxury homes to have parties and to use victims over and over again in these events pre the Super Bowl and after. The other one is mobile brothels. These traffickers and pimps will rent or purchase, luxury yachts, boats, so they're not on land and can elude and evade law enforcement a little bit easier. The other one is using RVs as well. So these traffickers, are going to a lot of means necessary to continue their legal activity and make money. Much of my time in the first few months starting the organization is kind of on the business administrative side of the house. So a lot of you as business owners and folks within the community know the fun about setting up an organization, but the necessary to do the work before making sure all your proper paperwork is intact. So our board set up our articles of incorporation, our bylaws, our ethics, our financial documents. We also received approval from the IRS to operate legally as a 501c3 charity, and also as a charity in the state of Florida by the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. We have held 8 board of directors meetings, 2 pre-COVID in person, which I do miss. And we've attended and participated in nearly 50 partner stakeholder trainings, listening sessions, and webinars. So again, we've got a lot on our plate, and with Florida being a wonderful place to host events, we're focused on the training awareness, the advocacy part in next year. So more about the requirements for human trafficking awareness training. In addition to the language that created the Florida Alliance, the legislature has now required healthcare and medical professionals licensed professionals to receive and to complete a 1-hour training course. So the Florida Alliance, in concert with the Pasco County Sheriff's Office, developed a training course. It's about 2 hours. Any industry can take it, but the specified professionals on the screen now are required to complete it, print out a certificate of completion, and provide it to their employer. And this training, there is no charge for it, and I highly encourage anyone to take it. It's very interesting from the fact that it plays out a variety of different scenarios that you might come into you might come into play with a potential victim or see something. And so rather than, reading literature, seeing these potential situations play out through this training is very insightful. And this training was approved by the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation. So if you are in any of those specified industries, it does have to be approved. And I see that Stephanie Shoemate has asked about school staff training. The fall before last, the Department of Education promulgated a rule for all 67 counties to provide age-appropriate human trafficking awareness training. And I know that the plans are being reviewed, and they're actively being coordinated with the school districts. I will note that the Broward County School District does use our training as its official training for its professionals. But you can go to the Department of Education website to review your school district's plans and obviously reach out to your respective county. Here. Yeah. Have I missed any other questions? I do see the other requirement for specified industries is for the hospitality and tourism industry. Folks like valets, housekeepers, front desk receptionists, oftentimes, might see something from an exploitative situation. So it's so important that they know the signs. And again, the requirements and the timing of that training is on your screen now. So COVID and the pandemic, there's a couple different stats on the screen that I do want to share. The lockdown and the stay-at-homes globally have impacted 2.7 billion workers, which is 81% of the world's workforce, according to the International Labor Organization. Calls to the National Human Trafficking Hotline have increased 40% this year compared to the same time last year. And 13% of organizations have seen an increase in sexual harassment complaints with regards to housing. So unfortunately, safer at home has not been safe for all. Human trafficking and COVID-19 have something in common, which is they both take advantage of those most affected by the inequities prevalent in our society. COVID-19, like human trafficking, can happen to anyone, but it is a lot more likely to happen to people already facing hardships, including poverty for one. Loss of jobs, loss of income, potential loss of housing due to COVID-related conditions have created a new class of victims. Now, during these stay-at-homes and the shutdowns, traffickers are more easily exposing already vulnerable and desperate victims through high unemployment rates, universal economic collapses, increased screen time, loss of community support systems, language barriers, immigration status, all of which open doors to victims to be lured into a potential exploitive situation. In the United States, individuals who have managed to leave their trafficking situation are now considering or being forced back into that exploitive lifestyle because they've lost their jobs, again, lost shelter and medical insurance. They're very at more severe risk by being re-trafficked, and victims have been reported being contacted by their traffickers, again, during this pandemic. Some who had found support in shelters are becoming homeless, as a lot of nonprofits and shelters are having to close or shut down because of lack of financial support. We've also heard reports that some landlords are advertising room shares in exchange for sex on social media sites. So at this difficult time, so many are suffering the consequences of COVID-19 and its accompanying economic fallout. It's critical that combating human trafficking remains a focus of government at all levels. It's also a focus, obviously, for law enforcement, philanthropists, and the private sector. And for the private sector, we need to make sure that we're particularly attentive to make sure that labor trafficking does not occur in their supply chains as well. So services for victims of trafficking are now more important than ever. Service providers are facing extraordinary challenges, given staffing shortages, social distancing regulations and requirements, as well as further potential funding losses due to the economic downturn. So what can you do? Attend more sessions like these. Learn the indicators, attend more trainings. Didn't highlight as much in this training, but know where your goods and products are being made. If it costs you a little bit more for that chocolate bar or that coffee, ensure that it's made with fair labor practices and not child labor or forced labor. volunteer. There's a lot of great organizations and resources in our area. And I know we have some folks on this meeting as well, from the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking, the Florida Coalition Against Sexual Violence, and STAC, Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. So I challenge you to read more about the issue and find ways that you can get involved with your organization or individually with local efforts. This is the Department of Homeland Security's Human Trafficking Awareness Campaign called the Blue Campaign. There are a lot of great resources, infographics, one-pagers that you can share within your organization and your network in raising awareness on this issue. And again, the National Human Trafficking Hotline number, 888-3737-888, or you could text help or info to Be Free, which is 233-733. So again, I want to thank you for attending this session today and remind you that everyone has a role. Our overlapping networks create a safety net in our community, and it's so important to decrease that opportunity for risk. So by attending these sessions, reading different resources, we're empowering ourselves, our children, and our families. I appreciate your time today. I'm happy to answer any questions, and thank you for this opportunity. I did see, Amanda, what are you seeing with the recent highlight about child trafficking? Are you seeing increases or challenges due to mask usage? So it's an interesting question and point. While a lot of research is not published right now, that's kind of a misnomer. I know that in speaking with survivors, and on our board, when the mask orders went into place around the state, there was different things that she brought to my attention that I had never thought of because of her, lived experience, which is those triggers. She is in her 30s and has gone through tremendous strides. She is a phenomenal public speaker, does a lot of different trainings, but she said, Erin, I was, told not to say anything for years when she was a victim of trafficking, and putting something physically over her face, it triggered her and brought back a lot of, horrific memories. But because of the tools and the treatment that she's received over the years, she said and stated publicly, so I don't mind sharing, that it's more important to be safe, and she has the appropriate tools and resources to continue to make sure that she doesn't get re-triggered by putting the mask on. But I would say that that's a misnomer. I'm sure that people would exploit that for situations, because of malintent, but it's not as prevalent that I'm hearing. I want to go back and see if anyone had any other questions. Thank you so much, Robin, for putting the DOE site up there. And in closing, if there are no more questions, my last poll question. So do you feel more knowledgeable? Have you learned something that you didn't know? Ways that you can get involved? Whether it's through your company, your family, as an individual, there's a lot of wonderful resources. And again, I really implore you to reach out to the local nonprofits because they need not only our valuable time and resources, but people to really put an end to this horrific exploitation.
Erin, there's a few new questions in the chat box if you want to address those.
Sure. So hi, Liz Miller. What can we do to help as a community? There's a lot of different things. Again, attending trainings like these, this is a very high level overview. We have folks on our board and there are other resources that go more in depth in a variety of different manners, whether it's law enforcement, healthcare professionals. And so we do trainings a lot. So if there's a special need or request, please feel free to reach out to me, and my contact information is on the slide. But you can attend events. The Attorney General and we are a partner of her annual Human Trafficking Summit, which is coming up on October 6th. And you can register on her website. It's humantraffickingsummit.com. Tim Tebow is the keynote speaker. And as someone who went to school down the road just a little bit, it's exciting to hear him and how he and his foundation are working together to stop this in our state. Awareness campaigns. Again, money is important, but so is volunteering. And there are a lot of different opportunities for people to volunteer even here in our area. Are there any statistics on the number of folks who choose to stay in human trafficking after they were exposed to it? There are, and I want to make sure that I speak authoritatively. So I won't put out that number right now because I'm not remembering off the top of my head. But during the pandemic, as I highlighted, and there have been articles from all around the country, because of the conditions, whether a loss of job, potentially being left without to pay rent, people are extremely, extremely vulnerable, and they already have that pre-existing condition. Because they were trafficked before, the probability is that much higher for those individuals. And so unfortunately, to make ends meet, so to say, and provide for their family, for their children, there are anecdotal stories that I have been told that does happen, but I do not have a statistic. I do know with a lot of different things that are going on in this very unique and crazy and challenging year, there's a lot of being research that is done right now and information that's being collected and will continue to be collected. So I'm sure that next year, during the same time, there'll be a lot of information and ways that we can kind of do a debrief and learn from everything that's gone on this year. And again, as a reminder, Amanda says that you can unmute and ask questions as well. I'm happy to answer anything or to provide you with resources or ways to get involved.
Erin, I have one question. I couldn't figure out how to word it in the chat box, so that's why I wanted to ask it out loud, and it might be silly. Do you see, and is this myths of these big companies that are being involved in child trafficking through, websites of, I'm thinking of Wayfair. I've heard people who have stopped using services like this because that's, the myth or reality, I don't know. And so I imagine that what your answer is, but just kind of wanted to ask that now that we have you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And I noted it a little while ago, but it's so hard in the age of social media. When things are shared and reshared, oftentimes they start out as very well intended. So I'm thinking of the hashtag Save Our Children movement. I'm sure we've all seen the photos and the different information with that hashtag. Okay, great. From what I have been told and read, and again, I like to cite authoritative sources that are in the field, like our law enforcement officers on our board, but sharing good information, raising awareness. However, as we know, it can quickly become a slippery slope. And so there have been some fringe conspiracy groups that have used that movement and others, not just that in particular, but that more recently, for nefarious purposes to spread misinformation. And so it's so challenging because we feel motivated and implored to do something when we see or hear these horrific pictures and stories. But one, just reminding people, to get a second source, my journalism background, or reach out to great groups like STAC or the local regional human trafficking task force or our organization, because it's so important that we don't perpetuate that misinformation. We kind of do our homework. And again, there's the Wayfair, there's a lot of different things. They've put out public statements that that's not true. And it's a lot of work. It would be a lot of work for a company or individual, and Wayfair is a little different with their different sellers, rather than just going online or doing other nefarious things that the traffickers do. So again, just reinforce the message of asking those resources and subject matter experts within our own community.
Any other questions? Betty, I see you unmuted.
I'm just curious, is one of your partners the Center for the Advancement of Human Rights at FSU? They're really quite, good. And I happen to know the folks there. So I wonder, and so partnerships you
There,
do together and,
No, definitely. So Dr. Terry Coonan is fantastic, who heads up the center, and he also serves as a member on the statewide council for human trafficking. I appreciate that the work that they do, and I know that they are putting together a more advanced training course for individuals at FSU who want to learn more about this topic, and then also how to stop it, and get accreditation and certification. Data and number metrics are so important, because we don't know where we need to go without having the facts in front of us. And it takes all of us, and independently through various projects, they have done a phenomenal job. So I can't say enough good things about the work that he and his team are doing. So yes, he and great work, wonderful resource also in a variety of different manners, and really, really well thought out pieces that have a lot of good different tidbits of information that we can share. So yes, they're a phenomenal partner.
great, good to hear that. I figure that, but.
And I think I also do want to note as well, I am the only staff member for this organization, which I love, because you kind of wear a different hat every day. But as the stay-at-homes and the limitation on travel for me and for a lot of others, doing meetings like these, meeting with local regional task forces and different nonprofits are what my days are comprised of. But if there are organizations that you think that we should become more aware about their services or potential partnership, because we all have to be in this fight together. We have to be, having the same message and the same voice, and it's so important to be open and collaborative.
I had a question.
Sure.
So I have naively always thought that human trafficking was when you're watching your grandkids on a street or at a theme park, they get snatched and then shipped off to another country. I mean, does that happen very often? Do I need to worry a little bit less, or do I still need to worry as much watching our grandkids?
Great question, thank you. So that is very rare. The majority of victims are lured into a trafficking or an exploitive situation, know their perpetrator. A lot of the times it is someone that they've met online. Again, and I'm generalizing, but research has shown that the majority of cases, it happens over a period of time, and kidnapping is less likely. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be watching our grandchildren and our children, because physical safety is so important, but with regards to trafficking, it is less likely. Does it happen? Yes, but it's smaller numbers than sometimes what is out there and heard.
Hi everyone, Erin, I have something I might add.
Sure.
I put up the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center website, and our very first training that we did online, and I think we had over 500 people attend it, was on the risk that online activity or online trafficking happens with children. So how do you protect children online? And Marina Anderson, who's ours, you know her well, I'm sure, is our DCF coordinator for this area. She deals with these cases of child trafficking all the time. And just like Erin said, children are at much more risk online than they are in the playground from a stranger. So that brief training, I think it's 90 minutes, can really help ground you on how you can protect your kids.
Yeah, there are wonderful resources out there, from organization like STAC, like Robbins, Department of Education. There's a lot of information to consume, and some are a little bit longer and more in depth. So if you have an interest, the resources are definitely available. Yes, and Amanda will be sharing the full slide deck. So Tequila, I did see your question about getting those apps and the names of them.
Yes, we'll do the full recording and slide deck. So kind of Erin and Robin, I've seen like articles of, 35 children found are those children that are typically like that groomed process, or is that 35 missing children that have the different process, or is it all kind of scattered? I guess I just am wondering what that is, when you see 35 missing children.
Yeah, again, it's jarring and oftentimes unbelievable to see large numbers of individuals rescued or saved from anything. And again, it is being moved from place to place, and that's article from Georgia. Not everyone was being trafficked in that situation. So again, reading kind of further and between the lines and the whole article, again, I don't want to be too broad or generalize anything, but as we know, certain things are more eye-catching from a headline perspective. And there were victims of trafficking, a good majority within that grouping of people that were recently rescued. But again, we have to make sure that we read further, before kind of making those blanket statements. And I don't know if Robin wants to add anything as well to that.
Yes, I fully agree with you. And it's often the case too, when you see other cases in the labor sector, you can see people who are trafficked, who are not trafficked, but who are exploited, and people who aren't exploited at all when you go to some of these, the migrant farm worker camps and other places. So it really does vary. And that's part of the traffickers' cleverness, if you will, is they can have people have all different kinds of statuses, and it's really a way that they control them as well.
Thank you, guys. And is there any other questions? I don't see any in the chat box, but if anyone wanted to unmute, has a question, we have two amazing experts with Robin and Erin in the room. So I know this is a topic on a lot of our minds. So please please do that. With that, before the end of tomorrow, I'll have this full recording as well as Erin's slide deck with you. And then Lex, do you have anything to add?
I just wanted to thank you, Erin, for joining us today and starting the conversation on this incredibly important topic. And like Amanda said, she'll send out the information. I also wanted to thank our amazing LT staff, Amanda and Wrecker on here. We cannot do this without them, and Barbara, of course. And of course, our sponsor, CarePoint Health and Wellness. And stay tuned for additional events coming up in the future. And I hope everybody has a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.